Commander Vic of the Galactic Coalition watched the main view screen with 3 of his eyes, while the 4th tracked the tactical lattice that hovered above his command days. 1,000 glyphs pulsed and shifted in different patterns fleet. Positions, shield harmonics, weapon charge curves, casualty projections. The glyphs did not need to shout to be horrifying. Below them, the colony world of New Haven turned slowly in the black. Its night side no longer dark. Great wounds of light crawled across continents as the Krell invasion fleet rained plasma down in steady, methodical strokes. Cities that had taken decades to raise were becoming molten outlines in minutes. Atmosphere boiled into shimmering bands, even from orbit. Vic could see the surface haze ripple with heat. Catastrophic wasn't a word the Coalition used lightly. It implied the kind of failure that rewrote doctrine. This was worse, Commander. The tactical officer said, mandibles clicking against each other in a staccato that betrayed fear. Evacuation shuttles will not break through. The Krell blockade has closed the outer lanes. Their intercept pattern is complete. Civilian casualties are projected at 90% within the hour. Vic's scales tightened around his throat. Into centuries of military service, he had learned the taste of hard truths. He had watched worlds fall and fleets shatter. He had signed orders that condemned thousands so that millions might live. But hopelessness drew. Absolute hopelessness was something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Show me the defensive lines, he ordered anyway, though he'd watched them fail one by one. The tactical lattice flared. Red arc Krell trajectories cut through the Coalition's former positions like claws through silk. The crystal-shelled Vics had tried to ram the blockade. Their carapaces proof against most beam weapons. The Krell's plasma had cooked them from the inside, turning their proud ships into drifting glass coffins. The Helians, whose bodies could wade through fire that would incinerate other species, had deployed on the surface. They had lasted longer than anyone. Vic had listened to their final transmissions, voices steady even as their own air turned to poison. Even the legendary Void Walkers ancient, silent allies who moved between shadows and vacuum as if it were. Water had attempted a surgical strike on the Krell command node. The node had not been where it appeared. The Krell had anticipated them. The Void Walker's signal had winked out without a sound. Modern warfare, Vic thought bitterly, had become a math problem. Energy shields, range weapons, orbital denial. Whoever controlled distance controlled survival. And the Krell controlled distance, like it was part of their anatomy. Commander, the communications officer called, jolting him out of his spiral. Incoming transmission. Vic did not look away from the burning planet. From which asset? A pause. From Jerf. That single word ran through the command deck like a current. Heads turned. Antennae lifted. Translator's word. As if the devices themselves were startled. Earth, Vic repeated, letting it roll through his mouth like a foreign mineral. Confirm. Confirmed. Terran signal encryption. Coalition clearance tags. High priority. Vic finally shifted his gaze to the communications station. The humans were the newest species in the Coalition, barely one generation since first contact, soft-skinned, endoskeletal creatures from a comparatively quiet corner of the galaxy. They were friendly, energetic, and endlessly curious. They also told stories, old wars, ancient sieges, cities shelled into dust, soldiers marching through fire and snow and chemical rain. The Coalition had filed those stories under cultural myth, a species still intoxicated by its own past. After all, in modern galactic warfare, who fought wars on the ground anymore when Orbit decided everything? What do they want? Vic asked, and there was a sharpness in his tone he did not intend. The view screen flickered. Static flurried across it, then resolved into the face of a human. Sharp blue eyes, weathered skin, hair cut close to the scalp. The calmness in that expression did not match the chaos behind Vac's back. "Galactic Coalition Command," the human said, voice clipped and steady. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison, United States Marine Corps, Terran Expeditionary Force. We are in position to assist." Vic felt something like pity rise. In his chest, a young species, eager to prove itself, calling into a disaster it couldn't possibly understand. "Lieutenant Colonel," Vic began carefully, with respect, "this engagement is beyond your capabilities. We are facing a Class 5 invasion force. Thermal conditions on the surface exceed 2,000 degrees. No known personal shield can hold in that environment, and cannot." Morrison cut in gently, as if correcting a child's pronunciation. "Your report says your species cannot survive without shields in those conditions. That's what you're about to tell me, right?" Vic blinked. Yes. Morrison's eyes did not narrow or harden. They simply stayed fixed, unwavering. "Commander, we've studied your after-action reports. You've been fighting the Krell the way you fight everyone else shields up. Distance weapons, air superiority, orbital control. That approach is getting your people killed." Vac's scales tightened again, this time with indignation. "Then what do you propose?" There was a beat of silence, the kind that made the entire command deck hold its breath. "We walk in," Morrison said. For a moment, Vic honestly thought his translator had malfunctioned. Several officers glanced at each other, hands hovering over diagnostic panels. One of Vac's aides whispered something about signal interference. "Colonel," Vic said slowly, "the surface temperature is hot." Morrison finished for him. He almost sounded amused. "Yes, sir, we're aware." Behind Morrison's shoulder, shapes moved, armored figures strapping on gear, checking seals, tightening gloves. Humans in combat suits, bulky, angular, unadorned by the sleek shield projectors Coalition forces favored. "But see," Morrison continued, as if explaining something obvious. "Humans come from what you classify as a Class 7 death world. We live on a planet that tries to kill us in a different way every day. Heat, cold, pressure, disease, predators, catastrophic storms. And we built our civilizations anyway." Vic stared, silent. Morrison's mouth quirked into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We've got this thing called persistence. When the galaxy zigs, we zag. When you retreat, we advance. And when something's on fire," his smile turned grim, "we walk through it." Vac's tactical officer made a sound that might have been laughter, if it hadn't been edged with dread. "Commander," the officer murmured, "they will burn Morrison leaned slightly closer to the camera. We've got 500 Marines in modified combat suits. No shields, we know they fail. Instead, we're using ceramic composite armor, internal cooling systems, sealed respirators, and good old-fashioned grit. We're launching in 3 minutes with or without your permission. Vic found his voice again, though it came out quieter than he expected. You will die down there. Morrison did not flinch. Maybe. But those civilians will die for certain if we don't try. He paused, and something softened in his tone, not weakness, but a kind of stubborn humanity. Where I come from, we have a saying, no one left behind. Vic had heard the phrase before, passed around Coalition's social channels as an odd bit of human bravado. Now, hearing it spoken without theatrics, without a hint of performance, made it different. That doesn't just mean our people, Commander, Morrison added. It means everyone. Something ancient stirred in Vac's chest, a memory of wars fought face to face, of honor measured in choices rather than kill ratios, duty, sacrifice, the willingness to step into the impossible because someone had to. He turned his head slightly, letting the entire bridge crew see him make the decision. You will have your covering fire, Vic said. Spirits guide you, Lieutenant Colonel. Morrison nodded once, crisp as a salute. Appreciate it. Sir, Morrison out. The screen snapped back to tactical view. Vic watched 500 new signatures detach from the Terran transport vessel. They did not descend with Coalition elegance. No sweeping anti-grav arcs. No shimmering shield bubbles. They dropped like stones. Only at the last moment did their retro rockets flare brief. Brutal bursts to slow them just enough to survive impact. Vic could almost feel the violence of it through the display. Insane, the tactical officer muttered. And this time it sounded like or rather than judgment. Focus fire on grid sections Alpha through Delta, Vic ordered. Give them a corridor. The Coalition fleet obeyed. Lances of energy stitched down from orbit, tearing open gaps in the Krell's intercept web. Plasma detonations blossomed in hard white bursts. For a precious handful of seconds, the blockade faltered. Through that gap, the humans fell like meteors. Vic switched to ground reconnaissance feeds the moment their pods hit atmosphere. The cameras struggled, lenses warping. In the heat shimmer, for several seconds all Vic saw was fire-roaring walls of it. Waves of distortion that turned buildings into wavering ghosts. Then shapes emerged, humans, armored in pale ceramic plates streaked with soot, moved through the inferno as if the flames were just another terrain feature. They advanced in tight teams, disciplined and fast. Their comm channels crackled and cut out in the thermal interference, so they relied on hand signals, touch, and practiced instinct. A Marine at the edge of a collapsing street corner slapped two fingers to his visor, pointed, then clenched a fist. The squad flowed around falling debris. Without hesitation, Vac's fourth eye flicked between feeds, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. One camera locked onto a squad pushing through the skeleton of a shopping complex. The roof had collapsed. The air inside glowed orange with heat. The suit readouts scrolling beside the feed made Vac's throat tighten. External temperature 1,847. At the front moved a human with a red-striped helmet, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez. According to the on-screen identification, her cooling system alarm was pulsing amber, but she did not slow. She gestured sharply to fingers forward. Palm down, and her team lowered their profiles, sliding through a jagged gap. Behind her, a Marine hauled a survivor from beneath a slab of concrete. The survivor was a Helion, tall and luminous even in suffering, plasma burns crawling across their armor. The Marine cradled them like fragile cargo despite the weight. Got a survivor, Corporal David Thompson reported, voice crackling through degraded comms. Repeat. One Helion, alive. Good. Rodriguez snapped back. Rally point is to blocks north. Keep moving. We've got 17 civilians in tow. Do not stop. 17. Vic, let the number settle. 17 lives pulled out of a world the Coalition had already marked as lost. Another feed, a narrow alley lit by burning sky. A Marine Private James Wilson knelt behind a shattered wall, firing a kinetic rifle in controlled bursts. The weapons report was a harsh, physical sound, so different from the hum of energy weapons. Each burst kicked dust and fragments into the air. Krell warriors appeared through the smoke, tall, angular, their armor glossy and black. Plasma casters pulsing like molten hearts, they advanced confidently, expecting the usual Coalition patterns: shields, beams, predictable retreat. Wilson's squad did none of those things. Explosive charges blossomed at the Krell's feet, throwing them backward into fire. Marines darted between collapsed structures. Using the burning air itself as concealment, they slid under debris, climbed over molten metal, and kept firing, always moving, always pressing forward. Vic realized, with a cold astonishment, that the humans were using the inferno as cover. The Krell's sensors, tuned to detect shield signatures and energy spikes, struggled in the constant thermal roar. Their targeting systems hesitated. In that hesitation, humans closed distance because distance, Vic now understood, was not always an advantage. A third feed showed Lieutenant Amanda Foster directing a cluster of civilians toward an extraction point, a battered plaza, where evacuation shuttles could land for seconds at a time. Foster pointed, slapped a civilian's shoulder, shoved another behind a makeshift barrier. Her movements were efficient, almost gentle, despite plasma fire streaking past. And then Vic saw Morrison. The Terran commander moved through the heart of the inferno with the calm precision of someone who had trained for exactly this impossibility. He did not posture. He did not shout. He simply walked, directing squads with clipped orders, stepping into danger like it was a matter of schedule. The Krell finally realized what was happening. Their forces redirected, converging on the humans with overwhelming numbers. In the feeds, black-armored silhouettes poured through the fire like insects, drawn to heat. They expected quick victory, a soft new species surrounded by flame, without shields. Instead, they met something stubborn and sharp. The humans fought like a species that had learned to survive by refusing to accept the environment's verdict. They used collapsed buildings as fortresses. They used fire as a curtain. They used their own apparent fragility as bait. luring Krell squads into narrow kill zones where explosives and bullets did the work. Energy. Weapons couldn't. Vak's tactical officer spoke again, voice thick with disbelief. "Commander, the humans are pushing them back." Vik stared at the screen, unable to deny what his eyes showed him. 500 Marines, 500 were carving a corridor through an enemy fleet. That had shattered Coalition legends, and they were carrying civilians with them. Some were strapped into emergency harnesses. Some were half-dragged, half-carried. Vik watched a Marine lift a Vik's child crystal shell cracked. Eyes wide and tuck them against his chest plate like a precious relic. The child's hands clung to the Marine's armor, tiny claws scraping ceramic. 2 hours later, the last evacuation shuttle lifted off through a gap the humans had held with blood and relentless motion. From orbit, Vik watched it climb out of the burning atmosphere like a spark fleeing a bonfire. Morrison's voice returned over comms. Worn now, but still steady. "Coalition Command, this is Morrison. All civilians extracted. We're pulling back." Vik exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath for the entire operation. "Acknowledged. Provide casualty report." There was a pause filled with faint background noise, clanking armor, hurried breathing, distant booms. 43 wounded, Morrison reported. 12 critical, 0 Kia. Vak's bridge went silent all over again. But this silence was different. It was reverence. It was the kind of quiet that follows a miracle because no one knows what sound is appropriate. 0 killed in action, Vik repeated, tasting the impossibility. In conditions that should have annihilated you. Morrison's reply was almost a sigh. "We train hard, Commander. We take care of each other. And we don't quit." Vik leaned forward, for eyes fixed on the tactical lattice where the human signatures, regrouped fewer now, clustered around. Extraction points, still moving with stubborn purpose even as the Krell recoiled. "Lieutenant Colonel Morrison," Vik said slowly, "the Coalition owes your species a debt." "No debt." Morrison answered. Vik could hear exhaustion threaded through the words like frayed wire. "Just remember we're all in this together." That's the human way. The Terran vessels rose to meet the Coalition fleet, battered but intact. As their signatures merged into the formation, Vik turned to his officers. "Update the tactical database," he ordered. The tactical officers' mandibles clicked. "Classification parameters." Vik paused, searching for words that felt equal to what he had witnessed. "Classification. Humans," he said at last. "Combat rating. Death World species." He glanced once more at New Haven, still burning, but no longer entirely lost. "Specialization." Vik continued, voice low and certain. "Impossible odds." His officer hesitated, then asked the question that hung at the edge of every mind. "Commander, most species have a nickname in the database. What should we call them?" Vik thought of 500 figures walking calmly through hell itself to save strangers. He thought of the phrase Morrison had spoken without flourish. "No one left behind." He imagined the Krell, proud and cold, learning too late that there were enemies who did not fear the fire. "Call them what they are," Vik said quietly, "the Unbroken." And throughout the galaxy, the stories spread faster than official reports, faster than politics, faster than fear. The old human legends of determination had not been exaggerations. They had been warnings. Because some species don't just survive the fire, they walk through it.